Standing there, staring at the long shelves crammed with books, I felt myself relax and was suddenly at peace. Helene Hanff, Q's Legacy, a delightful account of a lifelong love affair with books. I love bookstores, all bookstores. Hell, I owned one for a while and have spent more time in them over the course of my life than anywhere outside of my own house. And while bookstores that sell new books, especially independent bookstores that sell new books, have a charm and an allure, there's really nothing quite like a good used bookstore if you're a book lover. A new bookstore, filled with freshly printed copies of books both new and old, is about fresh journeys, while a used bookstore is about continuing a journey already begun. Both are voyages of discovery, but one is, I believe, more communal than the other in a small but significant way. Now, before you think I've gone all weirdly mystical or am reliving my teenage angst, let me explain what I'm talking about here. I believe that the Carlos Ruiz Zafón quote about books from The Shadow of the Wind is true. It says, "Every book, every volume you see here has a soul, the soul of the person who wrote it and of those who read it and lived and dreamed with it. Every time a book changes hands, every time someone runs his eyes down its pages, its spirit grows and strengthens." I believe this is true because I believe books are alive. It's especially true of fiction, where a writer puts more of themselves into the pages than in any other form of writing. Books are a spiritual experience. Reading is a spiritual experience. And if you think I'm going just a tad overboard with this, consider that every major religion in the world is based on a god or gods known only because their story is written down in a book. The Torah for the Jews, the Bible for Christians, the Quran for Muslims, the Upanishads for Hindus, the various sutras for Buddhism, and so on. Anyway, back to the two types of journeys: new books versus used books. When you buy a new copy of a book, whether that book is a new release or an ancient classic, you're entering upon a brand new journey with that particular book, even if you've read the story before. When you buy a used copy of that very same book, you become part of its life and history along with everyone else who has ever owned it or read it. I'll give you an example from my own collection. I have what some consider a bad habit of buying multiple copies of the same book, often in as many editions as I can find. As a side note related to the earlier Shadow of the Wind quote, one of my prized possessions is an advanced reader's copy of the novel, because when I read that copy, I'm reading the same one as someone who read the story before anyone else, before it was even published in its final form. It's just really cool to me, kind of like owning a Springsteen demo tape. Anyway, so I have a brand new paperback copy of a recent British printing of Hemingway's A Movable Feast. When I read that copy, which is rarely to be honest, I know that I'm the only one who ever has. Yes, millions have read the story, and we connect as readers in that way, but only I have read that specific copy. To use the earlier quote, it has only my soul and Hemingway's attached to it, and my history with it is severely limited. I have a different copy of A Movable Feast as well, one I picked up in a used bookstore in Plano, Texas years ago. It's a book club edition that came out in 1964, which was the original publication year of the non-book club edition as well. It has no dust jacket, and it's beat all to hell. I've carried it all over the country. I've read it on beaches and in cafes and parks, and I know it to the point that I can see the actual pages in my mind, complete with page numbers, even if the book is closed and on the shelf. I associate it most strongly with rainy autumn days, sitting in an open garage in my old house, or on a covered coffeehouse patio. For me, that book, that copy, is as much a part of fall as leaves turning and college football. I also know, since I got it used decades after publication, that numerous other people read it in countless other places, and their experiences, thoughts, and very selves are imprinted on its pages. Those things are imprinted on the pages as much as the words themselves. You may think I'm a little crazy after all this, but give it some thought before you dismiss it. My definition of a used bookstore is about as broad as you can get. From John K. King used and rare books in Detroit, Michigan, to the guy selling books on the sidewalk on 32nd Street in Manhattan, to the bookstalls along the Seine in Paris, I consider all of them used bookstores. There are also, obviously, stores that sell both new and used books, but I personally don't consider these book-selling hybrids to be used bookstores as much as new bookstores that also sell a few used books. That's just a personal opinion. Used bookstores are a unique animal. For one thing, their relationship to their customers is very different from a new bookstore in several ways. First, they not only sell to their customers, they buy from them as well. How fairly they deal with those selling books to them greatly affects their reputation, the loyalty the community feels toward them, and ultimately plays a part in their success or failure. The bookseller-customer relationship is simply more symbiotic than you find in a traditional new bookstore. Second, used booksellers have to be more creative than their new store counterparts when it comes to acquiring books people are seeking. If I walk into a Barnes & Noble looking for a copy of Michael Chabon's Wonder Boys and they don't have it in stock, they can simply order it for me from the publisher. If I walk into the excellent Recycled Books in Denton, Texas, and encounter the same issue, they have to go to far greater lengths to keep my business. They have to not only track down a copy of the book, but also locate it at a price that enables them to sell it to me and still make a profit, usually a very small one. Most good used bookstores do share one key thing in common with the best new indie bookstores: a seriously bookish staff. No one goes into bookselling for the money. There's next to no money in it these days anyway, new or used. They do it because they love it. This is especially true of the used booksellers, who do not have the advantage of authors visiting to promote their newest release, or the boost in sales that comes from the hottest new bestseller. But they keep at it because they love it. And with used bookstores, there's just a feel. I can't think of a better word than feel, that used bookstores have that no other place can replicate. To steal another Zafon quote, this time from his novel The Angel's Game, I stepped into the bookshop and breathed in that perfume of paper and magic that strangely no one had ever thought of bottling. That perfume of paper and magic exists in most bookstores, but in used bookstores, you add dust and age and any number of other scents to the mix. It smells old and new at the same time and feels like a step into a bygone world. For book lovers, used bookstores are a special kind of refuge. For me, the best thing about a used bookstore is while you may not find the exact book you were searching for, if there was one you came in searching for in the first place, you can and will find literally anything at any time. Books you would never find at a new shop, let alone on an Amazon search, appear at just the right time. To mangle a Buddhist saying, when the reader is ready, the book will appear. At this point, I have to say that I'm envious of my listeners in the northeastern United States, where there are still a large number of used bookstores. That's just not true in the South, and especially here in Texas, where half-price books has driven nearly every independent used bookstore out of business with their ever-expanding juggernaut. Now don't get me wrong, I like half-price books most of the time, and I shop there fairly frequently since there's not really another option. But they have, in many ways, sanitized the used bookstore experience in their stores by filling them with bestsellers and remainders bought in bulk from the UK. One of the joys of shopping used bookstores is that they tend to reflect the reading habits of the community they're located in, since that's where they buy their stock from. Half Price buys in quantity and ships books to all their locations from a central warehouse, in addition to buying locally. So the local aspect is greatly diminished. Their stores are also just a little too cookie cutter for my taste, all in strip malls and all looking the same, except for the flagship store in Dallas, which is by far their finest. Personally, I love the used bookstores that people open in old houses, with each room set aside for a different category. It feels like roaming through a bibliophile friend's house, though most bibliophiles would never let you raid their collection. One last thought about what makes used bookstores special. Finding pieces of other people's lives inside the books. Of course, you'll often find inscriptions on the front flyleaf. But more than that, it amazes me what people use as bookmarks that they then forget about and that the bookseller never notices. Over the years, I have found inside newly purchased used books postcards, letters, concert tickets, parking tickets, gospel tracts, postage stamps, marriage licenses and divorce decrees, utility bills, and more photographs than I can count. A few of them quite risque. I found so many things, in fact, that I wrote a short story about it. Collecting other people's ephemera aside, I highly encourage you to seek out used bookstores, both near and far, and shop there frequently. From Shakespeare and Company in Paris to Joe's Book Barn down the street, they're a vital part of our communities and of our bookish universe. Let's keep them going, growing, and providing that special kind of magic only they can.